She owes us. Those were the first words that cut through the heavy silence of the courtroom. They didn't echo, they didn't shout, they simply landed. Soft, deliberate, cruel. My sister Eva spoke them with a confidence I had seen my entire life. A confidence that came from always believing she was owed something. She stood there in her pressed white blouse, hair neatly curled, every inch of her crafted to appear fragile and deserving. I stared at her, trying to understand how the person I once carried through heartbreak, illness, and despair could now look at me as if I were nothing more than a checkbook with legs. The courtroom smelled like old wood and paper, the kind of scent that settles into your lungs and refuses to leave. My palms were sweating, though the room was cold. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Across the aisle, my parents sat beside her. Not behind me, not beside me, beside her. My mother's hands were folded tightly in her lap. My father's jaw was set as if he were preparing for battle. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. It felt like I was drowning in still air. Eva raised her chin and repeated herself more clearly this time, as if she wanted each word to lodge itself into my skin. She promised to support my children. If she will not pay, then she needs to step aside from this family. The judge looked from her to me. My throat tightened. My vision blurred for a moment. Step aside from this family, as if I had only ever been allowed in on a trial basis, as if I were a guest who had overstayed their welcome. I searched my mother's face for something, a flicker of regret, a hint of love, a shadow of confusion, something that would tell me she didn't agree. She kept her gaze on the floor. She did not look at me, my father. I had expected his coldness. He was a man of decisions and consequences. Still, seeing him sit there, backing this, backing her, felt like the final thread between us snapping. What no one in that room knew was that I had been the one who stayed awake with those children during their fevers. I had been the one who skipped meals to buy them school shoes when Eva spent her money on spa trips. I had been the one who worked 2 jobs while Eva blamed the world for her misfortunes. I had been the one who held my sister's head in my lap when her first love left her, rocking her while she sobbed uncontrollably. I had given and given and given until giving felt like breathing, yet here they were accusing me of abandonment. The judge leaned forward. His voice was even, calm, trained in neutrality. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" My fingers curled into my skirt beneath the table. I felt the tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying now would look exactly like defeat. I lifted my head. I felt something shift inside me. Something quiet. Something sharp. Something that had been sleeping for many years. Before I answered, I noticed the spectators behind us. Family acquaintances, neighbors, people who had known us since childhood. Their eyes darted between us, hungry for scandal, pretending to be sympathetic. They didn't know the truth. They knew what they had been told. The story Eva crafted so easily, that I was selfish, that I was jealous, that I had always been jealous. Such an easy lie to believe when one sister shines brighter than the other. I remembered a night, years ago, when I was 16, and Eva had been crying over another failed exam. My mother had come into my room frustrated and exhausted. "Help her," she said. "She needs you. You know she can't do this alone." The words stuck to me, like a second skin. She needs you. She can't do this alone. They were said so often that they became the script of my life. I built myself around her needs. I filled every gap in her life. I erased myself to keep her whole. Now she wanted to erase me entirely. A quiet laugh bubbled up in my chest, though it never made it past my lips. Promised to support her children. How interesting the way guilt and obligation twist into ownership. How easily love becomes a chain. I cleared my throat. My voice came out low, steady, far calmer than I felt. "Yes," I said. "I do." Every gaze in that courtroom shifted to me. Even my mother finally looked up. "My sister's lying," I said. "There was never an agreement. There was never a promise. What I gave out of love. I gave out of loyalty. I gave because I was expected to. Not because I owed it. Not because I was born for her convenience." Eva scoffed loudly, but there was a flicker in her eyes. A flicker of fear. She didn't like me speaking. She didn't like me stepping out of the role she had built for me. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I didn't stop. "She is right about one thing, though," I continued. "This did not start recently. This did not start with her children. This began long before adulthood, long before responsibility. long before either of us understood what family was supposed to mean. My mother shifted in her seat. My father's jaw tightened even harder. They knew where I was going. They were afraid, not of losing me. They were afraid of losing the story. The narrative they had carefully constructed. The roles they needed us to play. I looked at the judge, then at the courtroom, then at the woman who shared my blood but not my heart. "If you want the truth," I said softly, "then we need to start from our childhood. Because the reason we are here is not about child support. It is about what I was groomed to be in this family, and what I finally refused to continue being." The room stilled. You could feel the shift in the air. Every person leaned closer without moving. I paused, not for effect, to steady the trembling inside me, because what I was about to say next would tear open a history no one in that courtroom was prepared to hear. What I revealed next began long before that day. It began when we were children, with a secret my family never wanted the world to know. I grew up understanding something that was never spoken out loud. My sister mattered more than I did. Not because she was kinder or smarter or more deserving, simply because she was delicate, breakable. A flower our parents believed the world would crush if they didn't hold it up with both hands. They called her sensitive, gifted. They said she just needed a bit more support to become everything she was meant to be. Meanwhile, I was the child they described with a shrug. "She'll manage." That was my place. Not the loved daughter, not the praised daughter, but the daughter who would manage, the daughter who would figure it out, the daughter who would clean up behind everyone else. I remember being 8 years old, playing outside in the yard. Eva had been given the new jump rope, bright pink handles with glitter inside. I watched her spin and skip, laughing. I asked if I could try. She held it behind her back and said quietly, almost sweetly, "Mom said this is only for girls who try hard." I had straight A's. I did every chore I was asked. But Eva had cried that morning because she didn't want to practice her reading. So she was rewarded. I learned the lesson early. In my family, tears held more power than effort ever did. Our mother would say things like, "Eva just needs more time," or "Eva is special," or "Eva is fragile." And every time she said fragile, her eyes slid toward me with something unspoken, as if I existed to be the strong one, the responsible one, the one who never fell apart. By the time I was 12, the roles were carved into us like names in a gravestone. I was the helper. She was the helped. And somehow, that became love. When we were teenagers, the difference between us became even clearer. Eva had a way of walking into rooms and making people feel as if they should rearrange themselves to accommodate her. I had a way of fading into the background so seamlessly that adults often forgot I was there. Teachers adored her. Boys adored her, even when she did nothing to earn it. She had the kind of beauty that people interpreted as sweetness, innocence, goodness. She could say something cruel, and people would find a way to forgive it. They would say she was just having a hard day. I had to be perfect to receive half the love she received by simply existing. When Eva got pregnant at 17, there was shock at first, whispers, tears. My mother went silent for 2 days. My father punched a wall. But then something happened that I now understand was the turning point in all of our lives. They forgave her. Instantly. Completely. You would think a family would rally around the child who was not pregnant, who was trying to get through school, who had dreams of going to college. But no. They rallied around Eva. Their energy, their focus, their resources. They went where they always went. To her. I remember sitting in the kitchen while my mother washed dishes. The water was running. Her shoulders were shaking. I thought she was crying, and I reached for her. She didn't look at me. She just said, "Your sister needs you now more than ever. Not we need you, not thank you, just your sister needs you." It was not a request. It was an assignment, and I accepted it. I babysat. I cooked. I shopped. I took care of the baby when Eva was too tired, too overwhelmed, or simply needed to rest. I was 18 years old, rocking her newborn at 3 a.m. while studying for exams with my free hand. I fed him before I fed myself. I walked him to his doctor appointments. I skipped dances, dates, sleep. My mother told me I was doing the right thing. She said love was sacrifice. She said family meant giving until it hurt, so I gave until it hurt. Then I gave more. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I had time. I told myself that if I just held everything together, I would get my turn one day. I would go to school. I would make a life for myself. I would finally be seen. But time passed and nothing changed. The responsibility only grew. Eva got pregnant again. And again, the family gathered around her. Again, I became the one to pick up the pieces. My father once looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You should be proud. You keep this family together." He didn't say thank you. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't offer to take a single burden off my shoulders. I was not being appreciated. I was being used. Years passed like that. I worked 2 jobs, one at a grocery store during the day and one cleaning offices at night. Every paycheck disappeared into diapers, formula, doctor visits, school supplies. Eva always had a reason why she couldn't contribute. "I'm stressed. I'm trying. You don't understand how hard motherhood is." The thing is, I did understand, because I was living it too. Except the children weren't mine. One afternoon, I was sorting mail in my mother's kitchen. She trusted me with every task that required responsibility. I was the organizer, the caretaker, the reliable one. I didn't think twice about opening envelopes that had already been discarded in the pile to be shredded. But one envelope caught my eye. The logo was familiar, a scholarship program. My heart paused. I had applied to that scholarship when I was 17. I remembered the essay I wrote, the hope I poured into it, the way I waited for weeks for an answer that never came. The letter was addressed to me. My name was written in neat typed letters, but someone had drawn a line through it and written Ava's name over mine. My hands started to shake. I read the words carefully. Congratulations, awarded, full funding, dormitory housing, textbook allowance, freedom. A doorway to a life I had dreamed of. A life that had been stolen before I even knew it existed. I could hardly breathe. The room felt too small, too dark. I felt like I was falling into something deep and bottomless. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. My mother was standing there. Her face was calm, not guilty, not remorseful, calm. She looked at the letter in my hand and said quietly, "Your sister needed it more. Not we didn't mean to hurt you. Not this was a difficult choice. Just she needed it more." As if my future, my entire life, was an object that could be reassigned. As if dreams were a luxury only one daughter was allowed to have. I realized then that in this family, I was not a daughter. I was a resource, a tool, a structure meant to hold others up. Tools don't get love. Tools don't get care. Tools are used until they break. And the worst part, I didn't leave. I stayed. Because I believed I owed them. Because I believed that love was earned through suffering. Because I believed that if I just worked harder, tried harder, gave more, they would finally see me. But what I discovered later proved that the scholarship was only the first thing they took from me. There were others. So many others. What would you have done in my place? Because what I found next didn't just break my heart. It broke the story I thought my life was built on. And once that truth came to light, nothing in my family would ever be the same again. She was born to serve. That was the sentence that split something open inside me. The first time I heard it, I thought I had misheard. I thought it had to be a joke, a misunderstanding, something taken out of context. No one who claimed to love me would say something like that. No family should ever look at their own blood and see a tool. Yet when I heard Eva say those words so casually, with laughter in her voice, like it was just a simple truth she was repeating, I felt something inside me go still. Not angry, not sad, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. I want you to understand how deeply that moment burned. Because until that day, I still believed some tiny part of them loved me. That small hope died right there. After I found the scholarship letter with my name crossed out, I started to see things I had been blind to for years. It began with the small things. Receipts crumpled at the bottom of Eva's handbag. The kind that fall out when someone is careless because they are used to being covered. Designer perfumes, luxury skincare, a boutique stroller for her youngest, items far beyond anything my parents ever claimed to afford. I remember holding one of those receipts in my hand and asking my mother, trying to keep my voice steady, how did she pay for this? My mother's eyes didn't even flicker. She said Eva had used savings she had been building for years. The lie was so smooth, so effortless, it almost sounded rehearsed. That was when I realized I had never truly known my mother at all. Things began connecting in my mind like puzzle pieces that had been scattered for years. Every overtime shift I had worked. Every weekend I had spent babysitting instead of living my life. Every time I had skipped a meal so the house could have groceries. I had believed we were doing it together. I had believed we were all sacrificing for each other. The truth was different. I was the only one sacrificing. Everyone else was collecting. The receipts were only the beginning. I started paying attention to conversations. The way voices would drop to a murmur when I walked into a room. The sudden silence that carried the weight of something hidden. There were glances exchanged behind my back. Quick little smirks, like private jokes being shared right in front of me. I tried to ignore it at first. I tried to focus on work, on routine, on anything that made me feel steady. Yet the awareness stayed inside me like a splinter that kept catching on everything I did. One afternoon, Eva brought her friend over. I was in the hallway folding laundry. They didn't know I was there because the door was slightly ajar. I heard my name first, so naturally I paused. Then I heard Eva laugh. She doesn't know who she is without us. She owes us for everything. Honestly, it's kind of pathetic. Her friend laughed too, the kind of laugh that is sharp and mocking. So she just stays, pays, works? Eva shrugged and said, exactly. She was born to serve. She only exists because we need her. Do you know what it feels like to realize your own sister sees you as labor, as convenience? Not as a person with dreams or wants or a life, but as a function? I felt heat rise in my chest, but I remember not moving. I remember standing still because I understood something important in that moment. If I reacted too soon, if I confronted them without proof, I would become the villain in their story. The ungrateful one, the dramatic one. I needed facts. I needed truth backed by paper. So I started watching more closely. The next piece of truth came late at night. My mother had fallen asleep on the sofa, and I offered to put the laundry away for her. That was something I always did. I knew the house like the back of my hand. The drawers, the closets, the shelves. I opened the drawer in her room to put folded shirts inside, but something about the stack was uneven. Too high, too heavy. I shifted the clothes aside and saw a thin folder tucked beneath them. It was labeled simply with my mother's handwriting, household support. I opened it. Inside were bank statements. Years' worth. Pages of transfers. Direct deposits from my job. Every overtime payment. Every holiday shift. Money I had believed was going toward utilities and groceries. Except the transfers did not go into the household account. They went into Eva's personal savings. Month after month. Year after year. While I told myself I was helping the family survive, I was actually funding her comfort. Her clothes. Her outings. Her weekends away. Her life. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at those papers until my hands started shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe for a moment. I just felt something inside me crack in a way that could not be undone. I had given up my future to be responsible, and they had rewarded that sacrifice by taking even more and then laughing at me for not noticing. But the worst discovery came last. Because betrayal rarely arrives all at once. It comes in layers, each one sharper than the one before. My father had a small office in the house, a room I rarely entered. He always kept the desk locked, and I had never questioned why. A few weeks after I found the bank statements, I waited until everyone was asleep. I found the spare key hidden behind a photo frame. I opened the cabinet quietly, carefully, like touching a wound. Inside, I found legal documents stamped and notarized. Papers that named me as the legal financial guardian of Eva's children. Not temporary, permanent, irrevocable without petition. They had signed in advance for the day they expected Eva to struggle. They had positioned my life as the safety net. They had written my future for me behind my back. My signature was forged. I traced the lines of the fake signature with my finger. My name. Bent. Twisted. Used. Claimed. I felt a sharp ringing in my ears, like the world had gone silent except for the sound of my own pulse. In that moment, everything finally made sense. Every guilt trip, every story about family loyalty, every emotional plea. They had never wanted me to succeed. They had wanted me contained, controlled, useful. They didn't love me. They relied on me. That is not the same thing. I wish I could say I cried that night. I didn't. I sat at the desk with those papers in front of me and felt something cold and clear settle inside my chest. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop trying to be loved by people determined to use you. I put the papers back exactly where I found them. I closed the cabinet. I left the room. I did not confront anyone, not yet. They were still expecting the version of me who obeyed, who swallowed pain, who tried to earn affection that was never coming. They had no idea that version of me had died the moment I saw those forged signatures. So I made my choice quietly. I hired a lawyer, and I prepared for war. I know what you did. Those were the first words I said when I walked into the living room. My parents were sitting at the table, Eva on the couch with her phone in her hand like always. There was no tremor in my voice, no hesitation, just a quiet certainty that came from knowing there was no more pretending left to do. For a moment, no one reacted. Then Eva laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A full, careless laugh like I had told the funniest joke she'd heard all week. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're being dramatic again." That word, again. As if every sacrifice I had made, every tear, every silent swallow of pride had been nothing but theatrics. I felt something hot rise up in my chest, but I didn't show it. I simply placed the copied documents onto the coffee table. Bank statements, account transfers, the scholarship letter, and finally, the guardianship paperwork with my forged signature. My father pushed his chair back slowly, the wood scraping across the floor. He didn't even look at the papers. He looked at me with that same stern disappointment I had known since childhood. "You should be grateful," he said, like it was obvious. "You're part of this family. We all support each other." I remember my voice sounding distant, almost detached. Support each other? Or use me? My mother stood up, wringing her hands like she always did when she wanted to appear delicate, fragile. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Don't make trouble where there is none." It was astonishing how easily she could deny a mountain of proof. Eva just leaned back, crossing her arms. "If you wanted a better life, you should have worked harder." She said that to me. The person who worked 2 jobs for her, who gave up college for her, who paid for her children when she was out partying. For a moment, silence filled the room so heavily, it felt like it was pressing on my skin. Then I said the sentence that changed everything. "I brought my lawyer." The door opened. He stepped inside. The air shifted in an instant. My parents didn't know where to look. Eva's smirk fell right off her face. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not regret, not guilt, just fear of consequences. My father tried to raise his voice, to fill the room the way he always had, but my lawyer spoke before I did. Calm, certain, professional. He explained the legal penalties of forgery, financial fraud, misappropriation of earnings. He explained the process of freezing shared accounts, the possibility of criminal charges. The room went still. My mother started crying, her shoulders shaking in that carefully rehearsed way that always made people rush to soothe her. I didn't move. I had soothed her enough for a lifetime. Eva stood up and started yelling, pointing at me, calling me selfish, calling me cruel, calling me a traitor. "After everything I've done for you," she screamed, that line. I almost laughed. Everything she had done for me? But I stayed quiet. Quiet was not weakness anymore. Quiet was power. From that day, it became a war of whispers. News spread before I even opened my mouth. Eva ran to neighbors, telling them I was abandoning her babies. She told extended family that I had always been jealous of her, that I wanted to ruin her life because I couldn't have one of my own. She said I was ripping the family apart because I hated responsibility. She painted herself as the fragile mother, overwhelmed and betrayed. And I became the villain in their stories before I even had a chance to speak. People I had grown up around suddenly avoided my eyes in the grocery store. Cousins stopped responding to texts. Neighbors whispered behind fences. The shame rolled in waves, but the anger burned hotter. Because I finally understood. They had never defended me, because they had never seen me as someone worth defending. Every night, I gathered evidence. I collected statements. I met with attorneys. I froze accounts one by one. I filed motions. I watched Eva panic when her cards declined at the salon, when her car payment bounced, when the lights in her apartment flickered because the bill hadn't been paid. She blamed me, of course. She always blamed me. Responsibility was always mine, and failure was always my fault. That was the script of our family. I was done reading it. The night before court, I was sitting in my small apartment, reviewing documents one last time, when someone knocked on my door. I knew who it was even before I opened it. My mother stood there, wrapped in a sweater like she had come from some long, sorrowful journey. Her eyes were red. Her voice was soft. "May I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, but I stepped aside. She walked slowly, as if the air itself was heavy. I waited for the apology, for a moment of truth, for a crack in the armor of denial. Instead, she sat down, folded her hands, and said, "Family means sacrifice. Your sister needs you. You were born to help her. It's your role." I don't remember sitting down, but I did. I remember staring at her, not as my mother, not as the woman I had been trying to please all my life, but as a person, a flawed, selfish person who had made a choice long ago and never questioned it. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. My voice was quiet, steady. Not for what I did, not for what I provided, not for how I obeyed. "Did you ever love me because I was your child?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The silence was the truest answer I had ever received. I walked her to the door. She didn't hug me. I didn't hug her. There was no goodbye. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I dressed carefully. Not to impress them, not to prove anything, but because I wanted to walk into that courtroom as the person I finally understood myself to be. Not a servant, not a mule, not a placeholder for someone else's dreams. When I entered the courtroom, they were already there. Eva glaring, my father stiff and furious, my mother small and shaking. I felt my heart beating, but my feet were steady. My lawyer placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. The judge entered. My name was called, and the entire room froze. The first words I heard were the clerk calling the case, and the sound echoed through me like a bell tolling for everything I used to be. The courtroom was packed. I don't even know how so many people heard about it. Neighbors, relatives, people who had never cared to ask how I was doing. They were all there, waiting to see what would happen. My sister sat at her table dressed in soft colors, hair curled, hands folded just so, as if she had practiced appearing fragile in the mirror. My parents sat behind her, like a portrait of steadfast loyalty. Meanwhile, it was just me and my lawyer. My table looked almost empty. But I didn't feel small anymore. I felt steady, grounded, like the truth itself was a weight in my hands. The judge began reviewing the documents we submitted. One by one, line after line. This wasn't dramatic television pacing. It was slow, methodical, relentless. Every transfer of funds, every forged signature, every message where I was guilted into paying instead of her, every record of my overtime hours while Eva bought spa packages. The room shifted in waves. You could feel it. People leaning forward, recognizing numbers, recognizing patterns, whispers behind hands. A cousin shook his head slowly. A neighbor stared at Eva in disbelief. My mother's fingers trembled in her lap. My father's shoulders stiffened until he looked carved from stone. Eva didn't break at first. She kept her chin high, jaw set, eyes glossy the way she always made them when she wanted to look like she might cry. She tried to interrupt, tried to laugh, tried to shrug things off, tried to say I was remembering wrong. "We agreed as a family," she kept saying, as if repetition could replace truth. But every sentence fell flatter than the last. Then the lawyer placed the guardianship papers on the evidence table. The signature the court verified was not mine. The silence in that room wasn't empty. It was heavy, thick, unavoidable. The judge looked at Eva. "Do you have an explanation for this?" And the moment cracked. Her voice didn't tremble with regret. There was no remorse, no apology. Her mask snapped off just like that. She slammed her hands on the table and shouted, "Because she owes me! She owes all of us. That's her place. She was born to support me. That's what she's for." There it was. Spoken out loud, the core truth I had been drowning under for years. My mother stood up so quickly her chair screeched across the floor. She clutched Eva's shoulders as if trying to pull the words back from the air. "She didn't mean that," she said, voice cracking. "She's just upset." My father barked something about entitlement, about respect, about how I should have stayed quiet to preserve the family. It was chaos. Voices rising, bodies shifting, whispering surging to full-volume shock. The judge slammed the gavel so hard the sound snapped through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. He looked directly at my parents first. "Sit down." The tone was final. Then he turned to me. "You provided the financial support. You did not consent to guardianship. There is clear evidence of fraud. The court rules in your favor." Just like that, no applause. No dramatic music. No triumphant monologue. Just a sentence. And everything I had been carrying slid off of me. Not all at once. Not in relief. More like shedding a skin I had worn so long that I didn't realize how heavy it had become. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. The kind of breath that fills the lungs fully for the first time. Eva sat there stunned. My mother was whispering her name over and over, like she could rewind time. My father stared straight ahead. Not at me, not at anyone. Just at the wreckage of the story they had built around us. I walked out before any of them could speak to me. No dramatic confrontation. No final words, just doors closing behind me, one at a time. And in that hallway, with the sun filtering through dusty old windows, I realized something that should have felt like victory. I was finally free. But freedom is not the same as peace. I don't owe them anything anymore. That was the first sentence I said, out loud in my empty apartment after everything ended. The sound of my own voice startled me. It echoed off the bare walls, as if I had summoned a stranger. For most of my life, I only ever spoke in ways that kept the peace, soothed someone else, patched the cracks, held the family together. Speaking for myself felt unnatural, like learning to walk on a leg that had been broken too long. Yet there I was, standing in the quiet, realizing I finally belonged to no one. No expectations, no obligations, no chains disguised as love. The first night alone was not peaceful. I wish I could pretend I felt instantly free. But the truth is that freedom can feel like dizziness. I lay awake, terrified of silence, terrified of my own thoughts. My mind kept replaying voices that were no longer in the room. "You think you're better than us? We did everything for you. Family is duty. You don't get to choose." I had lived under those words so long that even without their mouths, the echoes remained. But there's something important I need you to understand. Healing is not quiet dignity. Healing is messy, uncomfortable, sometimes ugly. Healing is admitting that even after you walk away, a part of you still wants to be called back. I went no contact. Completely. No calls. No texts. No updates. I didn't send holiday messages. I didn't check social media to see if they said my name. And they did try. At first, it was, "We're worried." Then it became, "You're being dramatic." Then the real message arrived. "You think you can live without us? You'll come crawling back." That message was never said directly, but it lived between every attempt to reel me in. And I won't lie to you. Sometimes I stared at my phone, fingers trembling, wanting to reply. Not to reconnect, to explain myself, to prove that I was not the monster they painted me to be. But I forced myself to close the screen. Because explaining myself had been my entire life. Ending that was the only way to breathe. Therapy was uncomfortable at first. I didn't know how to talk about myself. When my therapist asked what I liked, I didn't know what to say. I had spent so many years being who everyone else needed that I had no idea who I was beneath the responsibility. I cried a lot in those early sessions. Not graceful tears. Broken, grieving tears. I grieved the childhood I never got to have. I grieved the love I gave that was never returned. I grieved the version of me that believed being needed meant being loved. Every session felt like peeling off a mask I didn't know I was wearing. And then something subtle started to shift. I started to wake up without dread pressing on my ribs. I started eating meals slowly, tasting them, instead of swallowing like someone rushing to stay useful. I began walking in the mornings, no destination, no purpose. Just movement, just breath. Do you know how strange it is to realize you never actually learned how to rest? I had to teach myself. Not rest as collapse. Rest as permission. One day, I bought a plane ticket. No one would have believed it from the person I used to be. I traveled alone. I sat on a quiet beach in a place where no one knew my name. I watched the sun sink into the ocean and felt something I had never felt before. My own presence. I was not responsible for anyone's hunger, anyone's loneliness, anyone's disappointment. I did not belong to anyone in that moment. And I remember thinking, so this is what they never taught me. This is what they feared I might learn. Meanwhile, life continued for them. Eva was forced to raise her own children without my hands holding her life together. My parents found a new story to tell, one where I was the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the one who abandoned family. They could not understand that I did not abandon them. I abandoned the role they forced onto me. Some people would rather rewrite history than face themselves. They chose the version where I was the villain, and I had to learn to live without defending myself in a courtroom that would never give me a fair trial. There were days I wondered if healing would ever feel complete. Healing is not a straight line. Some mornings I woke up angry, other days numb. Some days I felt light. But here is what matters. Each day, I belonged to myself a little more. I began volunteering, not out of obligation, not because someone guilted me into giving. I showed up because I wanted to show up. Helping others without losing myself was something I never knew was possible. I met people who did not know my past, did not see me as a resource to drain, did not treat love like a transaction. Slowly, I learned that love can be gentle, that affection can be given without a price, that relationships can be chosen, not earned. I found friends, real ones, people who asked how I was doing and cared about the answer, people who celebrated my small steps as victories, people who didn't take pieces of me when I was vulnerable. And I realized something. Family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by safety, by honesty, by reciprocity, by peace. I used to believe I was born to serve, to fix, to sacrifice. Now I understand something much greater. I was born human. I was born with needs and hopes and a voice of my own. I deserved love that felt warm, not heavy. I deserved to grow. I deserved to live. And maybe you're listening to this and wondering what you would have done. Would you have stayed? Would you have tried harder to be accepted? Or would you have walked away, even if it meant standing alone in the beginning? So tell me, what would you have chosen? To stay or to walk away? Because for me, in the end, I chose myself. And that is when I learned the truth. Freedom is the greatest inheritance.